From merchandising sales to new sponsorships to television ratings absolutely going through the roof to attendance to sellouts at basketball games to all-star games with record attendance both in person and on television, it is safe to say, North America, that the Caitlyn Clark effect has taken over the WNBA at this point. On today's Underrated Pod, we are going to talk about the Caitlyn Clark effect, as I like to call it, the Clarkonomics, and the impact that Clarkonomics is actually having on the WNBA today, tomorrow, and most likely into the future. All right, new to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe, and of course, like this video. Now that I got the groveling out of the way, let's get into it. Now we can begin with what actually happened during the WNBA draft. Record attendance, record ratings, just things absolutely going through the roof with the anticipation that Caitlyn Clark would actually go number one in the draft. And of course, that's exactly what happened. Now, what happened since then is a combination of the WNBA actually doing a good job in some respects to promote Caitlyn Clark, and then in other respects, just flat out shooting itself in the foot. That being said, there certainly have been a fair share of unexpected people to actually come out against Caitlyn Clark, thus causing a divide in the WNBA that is hard to believe they would have wanted, considering everything that Caitlyn Clark was actually bringing in to the league. You have to remember that Caitlyn Clark and her economics certainly made a significant amount of money while in college with her NIL deals. Yes, she represented State Farm, Gatorade, and just a whole slew of other brands. I even saw her name show up on a NASCAR at one point. Look, ultimately, with Caitlyn Clark entering the WNBA, it was pretty obvious to most media observers that things were actually going to go good for the WNBA. Now, you have to remember that 3 years ago, when Mark Davis decided to buy the Las Vegas Aces, and you might not realize this, he only paid $2 million for the Las Vegas Aces. This is 3 years ago, North America. Today, the value of that franchise is not $10 million, it's not $20 million, it is actually $140 million. To say there has been explosive growth in the WNBA since the time Mark Davis actually acquired the Las Vegas Aces is a bit of an understatement. Now, we all know that a lot of that explosive growth has actually happened once Caitlyn Clark actually joined the WNBA and actually started playing in those games. I mean, if you take a look at the Atlanta Dream, they play their home games usually in an arena in front of 3,000 people. But when Caitlyn Clark comes to town, they shift to the NBA arena and end up with attendance anywhere between 17 and 18,000 people showing up. And in fact, the overall attendance for the WNBA was way up this year, to the point that the Indiana Fever themselves actually had over 600,000 people show up to actually watch their games. So the impact on the court from an attendance perspective has been felt not only in Indiana, but across the entire league. The road show, if you will, of Caitlyn Clark traveling from city to city has absolutely paid off for the W in a wide variety of ways. Now, we have the merchandising impact as well. Caitlyn Clark, of course, is leading everybody from a merchandising perspective. Now, I don't want to overshadow the importance of Angel Reese and some of the other rookies, as well as a lot of the veterans in this league. I mean, clearly at this point, A'ja Wilson is the best basketball or the best women's basketball player in the world. She is so much fun to watch. I mean, so is Caitlyn, and so is Angel Reese, and so are 10 other players in the WNBA that are, quite frankly, sort of must-see TV. Now that the WNBA actually has a lot more viewers on it, a lot of those players that might not have had the impact of a national audience will now get that. And one of the reasons is, of course, this Caitlyn Clark effect. Now, you might be asking, why does the Caitlyn Clark effect exist? Of course, race has played a big component in the argument and discussion around why the Caitlyn Clark effect even exists. I'm going to take that out of this for a specific reason. And I'm simply going to say, just from a pure basketball standpoint, if you take a look at forget about the color of her skin. If you just look at the way Caitlyn Clark plays basketball, that is, in fact, significantly different than how any other player has played in the WNBA to this point. She has, if you will, Magic Johnson-style passing skills. I have seriously not seen anybody pass a ball as well as Caitlyn Clark passes a ball since the Showtime Lakers with Magic Johnson. That is how good she is at distributing the ball and getting her teammates involved. And then we factor in, if you will, the Steph Curry style range that she has from a three-point perspective. And there's absolutely, you can see an opportunity here for those two things to actually come together and turn into something absolutely huge, which is exactly why there was so much anticipation with Caitlyn Clark actually entering the league. The discussions about who's going to win the WNBA Rookie of the Year, the discussions that should at the very least have Caitlyn Clark in the MVP discussion, though, of course, A'ja Wilson is clearly the league's MVP this year. But that's not to say Caitlyn Clark's not a top 5 player already in the WNBA. So with all of that going on, the increase in TV ratings, a significant increase in attendance at games, a new $2.2 11-year billion contract with various networks to actually cover the WNBA, which in my opinion is not high enough for the era and time that we currently live in. I think it's safe to say that the WNBA is setting itself up for increased explosive growth. And I said this at the time that this contract was actually getting inked, that I felt as if the WNBA was not truly capitalizing on what's in front of it by just signing a $2.2 billion contract. Now, a lot of people in the W who actually work for the W will make statements like, well, we're pretty much in the same place the NBA was when it was 28 years old. And while that might be true, it is safe to say that when you have a huge opportunity in front of you where your league is suddenly growing at an explosive level, very similar to what happened with Michael Jordan in the mid-90s, you would think that the W would actually try to get more from its partners than it's actually going to get. Yes, $2.2 billion does sound like a significant amount of money, but chop that up over 11 seasons, which is the terms of the contract, and then chop it up over their revenue share. And the WNBA's revenue share is 50% of it goes to the, or 50% of it used to go to the NBA. There's a 16% to an outside investors. And then the W itself is basically left with about 42%. So assume 42% of that $2.2 billion is actually going to find its way back into the W. At which point, you're breaking that 42% up over 11 years. In other words, yes, it's a significant increase over what they're currently making. But when you actually look at some of the television ratings, you start to understand that the Caitlyn Clark effect not just on the Indiana Fever, but on the entire league is actually huge. And they probably should have been asking for, at the minimum, double what they're actually getting. All right, North America. I would love to know what your thoughts are on this particular topic. Go ahead and drop a comment in when you have a chance. For the Underrated Pod, I am Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day. To the cool new music we go.
This is Phoenix.